When I have an idea or we're taking on a new project, I will ask my senior management team member, do we have the capacity to take this on? What a lot of CEOs don't realize is that when you ask for a project to be implemented, there's a domino effect. I try to limit the number of things that we take on, but I really try to make sure that we have staff capacity.
Welcome to Nonprofits Now, Leading Today, a new podcast that gives nonprofit leaders a playbook to tackle today's most pressing leadership challenges. Barron Segar, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have a chance to talk to you.
Thrilled to be here with you today.
We first had a chance to connect when you were taking over as head of the World Food Program, and there was quite a crisis in the world. COVID was hitting us. You were a new leader. Now we're in a period where there's yet another really sprawling crisis with finances and government shifting and all kinds of things happening. And I'm curious, as you look back, what are some of the things you learned from the last crisis we went through that you find is really helpful to how you lead today and that other leaders might want to take advantage of?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, working with a really smart senior management team. What I learned to some degree is how to let go, to trust my senior management team. I have, as probably a lot of people have been micromanaged in the past, and what you realize that if you have the right team in place, if you have the right skill set, the right communications, that the team will really flourish. It doesn't mean that I'm not brought into decisions, but my team really knows when to bring me in to the conversation and the decision-making process. I would say another thing that we've done is measurement. Organizations, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, lots of different priorities, but we put in some measurements around key performance indicators and return on investment. I always remind myself, Stacy, that the dollars that we're investing, these are from our donors, our supporters. And I have a special responsibility entrusted with this level of philanthropy. I would say a couple other things. Listen to your supporters. What are we doing right? Where do they want us to go? You'd be amazed just by listening what you can learn when you're talking to those individuals that are entrusting you with their philanthropy. The last thing I would say is that I've learned to be able to change a decision. So I try to get data to make the decision. But honestly, what I've learned over the last 5 years is that it's okay to sometimes reverse a decision if new information makes you believe that that may not be the best decision based on the mission and the vision of the organization.
Can you give me a couple examples of what listening to your supporters has meant? How has that changed anything you're doing? Has it made you decide that you need to talk to even more of them? How are you approaching that?
So it's a great question. I'll answer it in two different ways. One is that you realize when you talk to our supporters that impact is that's the most important thing. Are we creating the impact that the donor wants us to have? Whether that is focused on saving a life in Sudan or Ethiopia or somewhere else around the world, or whether it's providing a school meal for a child in Colombia. So I would say knowing what's important to our donors has really helped us make informal internal decisions around our brand and our communication messages. Stacy, I would add that for me, being in front of donors has always been important, but I've really doubled down over the last year. I'm traveling more than I may have before because donors have a lot of choices. And I want to make sure, whether it's a new donor or an existing donor, that when they're making their philanthropic decisions, that the World Food Program USA is top of mind. And I want them to hear from me. The number of supporters I've heard from who are making gifts of all sizes, could be a phone call that I'm making or an in-person visit. Many times it's the first time that a donor, a supporter, a philanthropist has ever heard from a CEO of an organization. I want them to hear from me. I want them to know how valuable and important their gift is to saving the life of a man, woman, or child.
I know you recently made a decision about asking staff to return to the office, and all of us who have asked for that kind of thing have found that it's not always the most popular with employees, and I know that's something you encountered as well. When you talked to staff members about that decision, what kind of reaction did you get, and how did you handle it?
So, Stacy, I would say the return to office, which is hybrid, by the way. It's probably one of the most unpopular decisions I've ever made. And we had a staff retreat, and I was very grateful that staff members felt the courage and the culture to ask the question. And a staff member asked me, I said, well, Barron, given the feedback that you've gotten around return to office, has that made you think differently? As the CEO at the World Food Program USA, I have a responsibility to make decisions that are in the best interest of the organization and the mission. And that I, through data, talking to peers, have without a doubt come to the conclusion that a hybrid mode is what is best. And also said that we would continue to tweak as needed for those that were continue to come in to make it as flexible as possible and to be as accommodating as possible. However, I did let staff know that I was not going to reverse my decision, that I knew the decision that I was making was not going to be popular, but I still believe that it's in the best interest of the organization. I decided to also let the staff know that as a responsible CEO, that I love getting input from my senior management team and from staff, but we're not a democracy. I have to make the decisions that I believe are best for the organization, but not necessarily what all the staff want us to do. And I had a lot of people come up to me after I said that, and they were appreciative that I had let them know about how decisions are made, because a lot of people actually thought that decisions were made based on feedback that was flowing up. And so I think it helped with a better understanding of decision making and how I, as the CEO, will consistently put what's in the best interest of the organization and the mission first.
You've been in philanthropy for a long time, working at a number of different organizations, and I'm curious what some of those prior responsibilities, how did that affect some of the leadership lessons that you hold to today?
I have the great honor of being a founding board member of the Elton John AIDS Foundation. Back in 1992, Elton was getting out of recovery. I lived in Atlanta. My partner at the time was also in recovery, developed a friendship, and we started the Elton John AIDS Foundation, literally at his kitchen table in Atlanta. And what I learned is humility. Most people don't know this, but Elton never missed a board meeting in 25 years. And granted, his eyes would kind of glaze over when we did the finance committee report, but he was so in tune to what was going on. He did not want to be the lead of a foundation that was not present. But he kept the level of humbleness. It also taught me humility going to the field. When you're meeting with individuals that are relying on philanthropists and the U.S. government and governments around the world to provide life-saving medicine, it's a real awakening that you just never forget.
And since you were talking about being on a board, I'm curious how you handle your relationship with your board. It can be challenging to decide what to share with them, especially when there are lots of different fires to put out. How do you work with your board? How do you decide what to share with them, and how to ensure that they can offer you the advice that is truly useful to you?
So it's a conversation we have quite a bit because there's so much changing today and so much breaking news. A lot of breaking news tied to the World Food Program. So a couple of things that we do. Each year, at the end of the year, I do a board promise meeting with each board member. We go through the accomplishments over the last year and 3 to 4 focus areas for that board member over the coming year. I do the phone a friend. My board is filled with individuals with different backgrounds and different areas of expertise. So when I have a challenge I'm trying to solve, I kind of know who to call, because the beauty of having a very diverse board is that different board members have different expertise in different areas. And that has been a real gem. I wouldn't be here today. We would not have this level of growth if it was not for a board that is very mission driven, but also wants to ensure our success. We do a monthly newsletter to our board, but when things are breaking, I will, it could be on a Saturday or a Sunday, I'll pop out an email to the board If there's something running on the wire tied to the World Food Program, I'll make sure that they know about it. Because what I don't want to happen is I don't want a board member to be called by a reporter or to read about it as a headline in a trade journal. And so I will normally give my board a heads up when there's some kind of breaking news. I ask them for feedback. Every time I talk to a board member, I say, are we giving you the input that you need? So the big message there is that you always want to ask, or am I, as the CEO, giving you the information in a timely basis? And am I giving you the information that you need?
One of the challenges that I think many leaders face is the fact that with so many changes happening, it's hard to keep the organizational culture sound. Employees are nervous. We're asking them to do lots of different things, to change, to work harder. What are some of the things that you do to make sure that your staff feels that they have the information they need to do a great job and that they do avoid burning out?
So that's, Stacy, a big concern. Retention of all staff, particularly top performing staff, very, very important to me. I would also say that we do monitor turnover. We do exit interviews. Our turnover so far this year is about 3 to 4%. So I'm generally happy with where we are, but there's certain things that we do to get ahead of the curve. One is that we do an annual survey. And we want staff to tell us where are we doing well, and what are those areas where we need to do better. And I'll give you an example. Staff have asked that we do a better job tied to professional development. And so I take that to heart. So we now have a certain amount of money allocated to each staff member for professional development this year. We institute a summer Friday, so where staff can work extra hours Monday through Thursday and then take Friday off. That's been very, very popular. I would say that one thing that I do more frequently probably than I used to is when I have an idea or we're taking on a new project, I will ask my senior management team member, do we have the capacity to take this on? And I'm going to say that again because I've worked with CEOs in the past that never asked that question. And I remember being on the receiving end. And what a lot of CEOs don't realize is that when you ask for a project to be implemented, there's a domino effect. And so there are marketing communications, development, the president's office. It's kind of all hands on deck sometimes. So I try to limit the number of things that we take on, but I really try to make sure that we have staff capacity. I would say living the values is really, really big. And I tell you, the one that in my entire career that I've heard about the most is accountability. And when you hear the word accountability, that's mostly tied to accountability for bad behavior. So my career lessons in life is that if you have the right staff, the right people, you're going to accomplish amazing things for your organization.
Talk more about what you mean by that accountability piece, because I think people do sometimes mean it just in sort of the punitive way, but we're really talking about accountability to one another to get things done. Can you talk about how you have your managers explain that?
So I'll give you a live example. So I was incredibly proud of every single one of my teams. We know that at the World Food Program that we're facing a catastrophic hunger crisis around the world, and we need new approaches. And so the teams got together and they came up with a new fund. That's a critical hunger fund that we've launched here at the World Food Program USA. And the part I loved about it is that the teams connected and built a strategy and then brought it to me. And so I think there was this level of collaboration and respect and inclusiveness that really worked for the teams. So I would say there are great things that are happening. And I also will take the time to recognize staff members and teams that do amazing jobs. At the end of every all staff that we have every 2 weeks, it could be in person or virtual, we do shout outs. And it gives not me, but the staff an opportunity to shout out for an individual or a team that has gone above and beyond, tied to collaboration or respect or inclusiveness or accountability. When I think about accountability, I truly believe that this organization does the best that we can do, and we have the best talent, and we're kicking it on all cylinders. I do not believe that every year, every organization will always reach a goal or exceed a goal. When I think about accountability, I'm going to think about more around: are we exhibiting collaborative behavior, respectful behavior, that is good in a workplace? And so, for me, in walking and breathing and living the culture, is what is probably most important to me. I believe that if you have a strong culture, that the organization will do really well. Last thing I'll say is I worked for many organizations in the past. They had the culture, they had the everything on your desk and said, "Here's the culture of the organization." But boy, when you got there was no culture. And so for me, I was excited about coming to the World Food Program USA, knowing that as the CEO, I could drive the culture within the World Food Program USA.
One of the things that I think is a challenge in these times when we have so many crises coming at us is how to maintain your own time for development, making sure that you're constantly learning and thinking about things. And I know you're very dedicated to that. I'm curious, how do you carve out your own time for that at the same time that you're trying to ensure that your senior leaders are getting development time and doing all of those things?
So I'm very lucky because I have a couple mentors that I use. And these are individuals that I've known from when I lived in Atlanta to New York to here in Washington. Individuals that I can call and talk to and problem solve with. I also have a professional coach that really helps and guides me in decision making. But I'm going to use a word that he always uses with me. It's how to keep me centered. So in other words, all the noise that's going around, how can Barron stay centered in my communication, in my email, the way I think, in the way I may speak to teams. And so he really helps me stay balanced and centered and focused on the mission.
I know that part of what you're often doing is talking to leaders in other fields, not just other nonprofit executives. Tell me a little bit more about how you do that and what you find most useful by reaching beyond the nonprofit world.
So I actually, if it's okay, I'll speak within the nonprofit world and outside. Most recently, there was a group of us who met in Washington, D.C., six CEOs of nonprofits. We talked about board recruitment. We talked about how each one of us are doing in this current economy. What strategies are you developing? What kind of policy work are you doing with the new administration that's allowing you to break through and have better communications? I had a call just a week ago with one of my board members who is an executive with a large financial services firm. And I asked him if he could advise me on things that I should be thinking about. I'm not sounding the alarm bells right now on our finances or where we are, um, because I have a lot of confidence in where we're going as an organization. We're seeing weakness in some areas, but I would also say, Stacy, we're seeing strength in others. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and I want to be prepared. And what my board member said to me was, you really should think about a contingency plan. You may not need it now, but always have a plan B. And think about those things where you're either underspent, and or things that you maybe could postpone doing. And so we've started that process as a senior management team. Again, I would say I'm not alarmed based on our performance so far this year. We have a very strong pipeline. We have very generous and committed donors and supporters. But I do think it's prudent for us to think about, if we need to, what expenses could we cut and how would we start that?
That's really important. Do you have some other advice on how to smartly do a plan B that has you prepared but doesn't alarm colleagues or get people nervous when you start talking about some pretty serious cuts or changes?
So I'll give you some advice that I learned today. How's that for breaking news?
Excellent.
I had a colleague that just walked into my office and we were chatting, and the colleague said, it's okay to be more frank with the staff about doing a contingency plan and doing a plan B. That, we are all aware of what's happening around the world and in the economy, and it's okay. And better for us just to know. I'm an optimist, and I have to balance that sometimes with the reality of what's happening around the world. I laid out to my senior management team, let's just go through the process. If you had to cut expenses, where would you start? I'm going to give that challenge to you. I'm not giving you a dollar amount, but I want you to look at your budgets and what can we either postpone or what can we not do? What's a nice to do versus a must do? And work with our CFO, COO, and come up with the plans and then present them to me. I would say that what I learned there was it's okay to empower your senior management team members to come up with the strategies and to go back if we need stronger strategies.
You talked about grooming your senior team so that they could take over and do more things so that you could be on the road and do some of the other things you need to be doing. Could you talk a little bit about how you got them ready for that and what kinds of things you were thinking about in terms of their development so you could feel, really certain that they were ready to do it and excited about doing it?
So number one, in order for me to be more external facing with donors, with partners, media entities, it requires a really cohesive senior management team. Just to be clear, this is not like Barron's out of the office more than 50%. We've had a lot of discussions at the senior management team level. We also have had some facilitated discussions around my desire to be more externally focused, meeting with, for example, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, one of our biggest philanthropic partners and collaborators and friends, how we can do more field work with them, and how our messaging can reach more of our supporters. So part of that dialogue has been, what do we need for this to work? I really want my CFO, COO to do more of the day-to-day decision making. Also, I'm available if there's a disagreement somewhere. I also would say miscommunication is going to happen. But what's most important is we have got to assume positive intent and use the phrase that I always like to use. And it's very simple. So I'm going to give you my secret sauce. I'd like to learn more. Can you help me understand?
Those are both things that two of my mentors also said. Help me understand, because then it's really clear, but always assume good intentions, because it's amazing sometimes what happens when you don't. So remembering to tell people that, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Absolutely critical. Tell me more about how you're communicating with supporters. I know you're getting out to see them in person, but tell me a little bit more about what messages you're giving, what's resonating, what's truly working when you talk to them.
So I do a lot of in-person meetings. And I have to say, it's so inspiring to me. I mean, when you hear the story of why an individual or a faith-based organization or a company or a foundation or an influencer or a goodwill ambassador has chosen to support the World Food Program, it just sends chills down my spine. And it reminds me about the importance of the mission of preventing starvation, making sure that individuals don't go hungry, and a particular affinity for women and children. And my job is to reassure our supporters that we have checks and balances in place to make sure that the funding is going to the location where the donor intends to make the difference, that we're getting reporting back, that we're doing visits to many countries. But I would say, Stacy, the interesting thing, and I think it's important to say that I manage it with optimism. So I had a recent visit with a very significant supporter of ours, and the supporter said, "Wow, you're the first person that's talk to me that wasn't like the sky is falling. And I said, I really didn't know what to say, but I did say that I think there's a lot of hope in the world. And I said, what really keeps me excited and optimistic is that I know through the generosity of people in the United States that hunger is top of mind, and that individuals are helping communities and families, making sure that another meal is provided, making sure that a female smallholder farmer is trained so they don't need to rely on an organization like the World Food Program to make sure that those 20 million school meals are delivered every single year. So it's to talk about the impact, it's to talk about the financial efficiency of the World Food Program USA, and honestly to listen to the donor and also ask for their advice. Is there something that we need to be doing differently in our communication and in our messaging?
Is there anything you want to say that you've learned, especially that maybe has influenced how you do what you do because you heard it from a donor?
I think over communicate. Donors want to be realistic, but they don't want to hear the sky's falling. And this is just consistent across the board. People are so generous in the United States. Faith-based communities are so generous. The corporate, the foundations, our digital donors who give $10 or $20, they're relying on you to make a difference, regardless of the level of that gift. Every day we collect emails that are sent to us from individuals who've given, and it makes you want to cry because of how personal the World Food Program USA is to individuals who are giving. A gentleman told us the other day, I'm living paycheck to paycheck on Social Security, but I'm giving you this $10 because I know that it could provide 20 meals. And so for me, it's never forgetting why we're here and why people choose to support the work of the World Food Program.
And that must be inspiring to your staff as well. I always love sharing with my team when I've heard something amazing about how an article impacted somebody or something that we did that made a difference. And you're right, you want to kind of bottle it up and share it with everybody as much as you can. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you do employee surveys and that feedback is really important to you and that you're constantly learning from it. Sometimes in employee surveys, we also learn things that we're not doing as well. What are the things you learned and changed and thought about doing differently?
One thing that I really listened to was how we do promotions, how we communicate promotions, how often we do promotions. I think that we may be inconsistent in giving the rationale for why different individuals are promoted, but staff want more information. I would also say we have a younger staff. 80% of our staff are Gen Z and millennial. And so I'm also trying to think for myself as a leader, what kind of messages do I need to modify to make sure that I'm hitting a home run with what my staff want to hear? How do you communicate around promotions, around professional development? How are you part of that process? But I would also say this, Stacy, and I've learned this from myself. There's a level of accountability that we each have for our own professional development. And this is really important and sometimes hard for people to hear is that the majority of my professional development over my career, regardless of my age, was really on me to learn and take those opportunities. So we want to support you. We want to go with you. We want to help you. But don't forget that professional development it requires both parties to take somewhere.
Absolutely. This has been a tremendous conversation full of so many useful ideas. I know I feel like borrowing some of them, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. As we reach the end of our conversation, I'd like to ask you the question that we're asking everybody who joins the podcast. How do you like to recharge?
So I'll say three things. I spend time when I can in Norfolk, Virginia. I grew up in Norfolk. Norfolk is like the best kept secret. I love the water. And so anywhere that I have the ability of walking to the water, seeing the sun go down, the sparkles on the water, it's my calming, my regeneration. It's one of the things, as my coach would say, that keeps me centered. So find that thing in your life that keeps you centered. Also being with family and friends in Virginia. I do try to take most of my vacation, but I would say, Stacy, one of the ways that I really recharge is going to the field. When I have an opportunity to go to a place in the world to talk to particularly women and children that are benefiting from the work of the World Food Program, it is so inspiring for me. It recharges me. It lifts me up. So incredibly inspiring, going to the field and experiencing the joy of helping.
That connection to mission is absolutely crucial. I agree with you that that's the best way to recharge. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stacy.